57% of the people in this country are not making enough money to pay for basic human needs. That's food, shelter, and transportation. I spend a lot of time in the middle part of this country representing people. I'm representing 1,000 families in Columbiana County, Ohio, whose lives were upended by the Norfolk Southern spill. I'm seeing Americans live at a level of desperation, of depression, that I never thought I'd see in this country, that I associated with Latin America when I was a boy. The average income now in America is 5,000 times less, the average income, $5,000 less than the cost of basic human needs. And that's why over the past, and 35% of the people in this country are no longer making enough money to pay for those needs. In order to bridge that gap, that $5,000 gap, people are putting their debt on their credit card. And the credit card rates, the credit card debt, personal debt, this week, for the first time in history, exceeded $1 trillion. And people are paying on average of 22% interest on that debt. If the mafia did that to you, it'd be called loan sharking. But if the banks do it, it's business as usual. And those banks are owned primarily by three companies: BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. So they are now, and over the past year, we've lost 700,000 homeowners in this country. Those homes were bought up by those companies. And that's more homes than we lost in 2008 during the great mortgage crisis the year before. In 2021, we lost 700,000 homes that are now owned by those companies. So homeowner land, those people are now moved to rentals. And the rentals are going up because of the pressure from those home ownership. So we're seeing the land in this country, literally the equity that you need to borrow money, that Americans need to borrow money to build businesses, is being stripped mined away from them. Here in this state, half the farmland is now owned by non-farm companies, and it's being purchased up again. A lot of those companies are BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, and Smithfield. Smithfield, I spent 15 years suing in North Carolina. They invented a new way. They built a slaughterhouse, invented a new way of slaughtering hogs. They went into business with Wendell Murphy. They dropped the price of pork from 65 cents a pound to 2 cents a pound. It cost the farmer at that point 35 cents a pound to raise a hog to kill weight. And they took over the whole hog industry. They put out of business 28,000 hog farmers in North Carolina. They replaced those with 2,200 factories, 80% of them owned or operated or contracted to one company. So, and today, virtually 100% of hog production in the state of Iowa is owned by that company, by Smithfield or by Bruce Ratstetter. So you have the opposite of what Thomas Jefferson said was necessary for us maintaining our democracy, which is that our landscapes would be left in the hands of tens of thousands of independent yeoman farmers, each with a stake in our system of government. We now have a colonial system here in Iowa and around the country, where the land base is owned by a corporate aristocracy, a corporate kleptocracy, who is using their control of the land to control the politics and to strip mine the wealth from the public. So this boy said to me, I want to be proud of our country. When I was a boy, I knew that the United States of America was the best country in the world. We had been blessed by God. I grew up in a period that is called by social scientists and economists the Great Prosperity, a 50-year period following World War II. When I grew up in the 60s, my uncle was president, we had created the American middle class, the greatest generator of wealth in the history of mankind. We owned half the wealth on the face of the earth in our country. When I traveled abroad with my parents, which I did often, people would come up and say, I'll do anything to get your blue jeans. American blue jeans, American automobiles, transistor radios, RCA Victrolas, all of these American products, we invented them, we made them, and everybody in the world wanted them. When I went to Poland as a boy, it was a communist country. The communists didn't want anybody to know that we were there. My father went there without any invitation. They blanked us out in the newspapers. We went one day to visit the Cathedral of the Black Maria in Krakow. There was nobody in the square when we went in, and there was no newspaper notices. We went to meet the cardinal, who was a saint, who was a living saint. He had stood up to the communists. He had endured torture in prison. And we spent 4 hours with him. And when we walked out, there was 1 million people waiting for us in that square. They surrounded our car. My father stood on top with 3 of my 10, I think, that time siblings, and myself. And I was a 12-year-old kid, and I signed autographs for an hour. And I saw the people with tears coming down their face, the electric response of the crowd, because people all over the world love the United States of America. And one of the reasons they loved us so much was because we had avoided going to war. My uncle had told his best friend, Ben Bradley, the principal job, Brent Bradley asked him, what do you want in your gravestone? And he said, he kept the peace. He said, the principal job of an American president is to keep the country out of war. He said, I don't want African children and Latin American children and Asian children, when they think of the United States, to think of a man in a military uniform with a gun. I want them to think of a Peace Corps volunteer. I want them to think of the Kennedy Milk Program, the Alliance for Progress, the USAID, which at that time was actually trying to build middle classes in those countries. We want to put America on the side of the poor. Because of that, there's more statues today of John F. Kennedy, more avenues named after him, more boulevards in the capitals of Latin America, Africa, and Asia than any other US president. But he managed to keep this country. He never sent a single combat troop abroad to die. He sent 15,000 advisors to Vietnam. A month before he died, he found out 75 Green Berets had died, and he ordered them all home. October 22nd, 1963, he signed National Security Order 263, ordering all troops home from Vietnam. A month later, he was murdered. A week after that, LBJ remanded that order, and we have become a warfare state.